What was some of the tools that they used to extract confessions from people?
That was a very hard section to write about because I think people here, we think about like what the police will do to get a confession out of you. It's like, okay, they're going to yell at you, they're going to rough you up, things like that. It's like, all right, that's what we're used to as like police brutality. So at a certain point, they lowered the death penalty for children to I think it was 12 or 14.
12.
12. And this was a big problem for defenders of the Soviet Union because this wasn't like hearsay, this was public. And they're like, what are you doing? And one of the reasons what they were doing is if they would arrest people, they would have a death warrant for that person's kid signed on the desk of the interrogator. So, your dad, who I got to meet a few weeks ago in Austin, he's coming in. He knows he didn't do anything. Look, I'll just talk to them. It'll be fine. And there's the death warrant for Chris, in his view, signed. Like it's ready to be delivered. He'll confess to anything. I mean, they were having Jews confessing to working for Hitler. And there was another time when, they brought in someone who was an old Bolshevik, and the old Bolsheviks were the people who fought the Tsar. They were like the terrorists of their time, like people who were fought with Lenin, and they were hardened men. The Bolshevik would arrest them. They had the Katorga system, which presaged the gulags, and they'd send them to Siberia, middle of nowhere. And these men did that time for their political views. And they brought in one of them, and they called I think it was his mom or his mother-in-law, and check because she's watching his kids right there. And it's like, oh, are your kids okay? And they're like, yeah. And so they just turned to him. He's like, okay, I'll sign whatever you want, So again, there's something that is hard for us to understand the West. We are all used to these movies where like, someone's brought in, Tom Cruise is tied to a chair and they're beating the crap out of him. He's like, spitting blood at them. He's like, just glaring at them. You bring in, it's like, we have your kids. The calculus is, and they're not bluffing. It's not like we have them, but like, we don't really want to do anything. Like they don't care. And they don't care. And when that happens, I don't think any of us can understand what our thought processes would be like.
What was the conveyor?
Oh, so the conveyor, yeah, there were so many different techniques that they used. The conveyor, it was called a conveyor because, they'd wake you up in the middle of the night and someone would be yelling at you for 4 hours to confess, and they'd make you write down your whole life story, and they'd rip it up and write it again. And then every element go, oh, so when this happened, and then when the guy who's interviewing gets tired, they just bring somebody else like a conveyor belt, and you're up for days at a time. And as soon as there's any discrepancy, and was the movie you and I went to see, was it Amelie or was it this other movie? Oh, why were you lying about what movie you saw with Chris? And then it's like, okay, so now they have 10, this is 10 times you lied to us. Look at, you're not a trust. It's very easy when someone hasn't slept, when every little slight detail is being examined and the guy's just a fresh one through the door. And the thing is, the interrogators often knew this guy hasn't done anything. It was just like, he's got a job to do to just get you to sign that piece of paper. And the quicker we could do this, the quicker we could get on with our lives.
There's a study that was done on TSA agents in airports, and what they wanted to see was, if given a outcome, will people retrofit reality in order to be able to achieve it? So the original study was actually faces that were either angry or happy. And there was 100 images and you had to pick between them: angry, happy, 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 angry, angry. But after the first 50 images, it was only angry images. But people still kept on picking happiness out of anger, even though it was quite obviously angry images, because they had a predetermined idea that this is something that I should be searching for. And it was used to extrapolate out to a question around TSA agents, which is that everybody has gone through the scenario of there being nothing in their bag, and the security guy saying, we're going to have to open this up because something's come up, and you open it up and you're like, well, there's nothing in here. I don't know what could have come up. And you don't know if it appeared on the screen in a strange way or whatever.
Sure.
But there would be a question to be asked: if every single person arrived at the airport with their bags perfectly packed and no contraband or any of the other stuff in it, the TSA agents are still likely to pick out issues within that, because that is what they're optimizing for. That's the function that they're optimizing for. And it's kind of the same with regards to this.
Oh yeah, and then it's even worse because if think about it this way, what if that TSA agent is told 10%, like 1% of the populace or the people coming through are potential terrorists? Like we know through our research and our studies, it's 1% or 0.5%, whatever small number. And then you as the TSA agent is putting everyone through. Well, if you put everyone through, you're either grossly incompetent or maybe you're a potential terrorist because they would love to work for the TSA. And now how do you disprove that you're a potential terrorist when the proof is you're letting through literally every potential terrorist, right? You haven't flagged one single person. So this must be by design. One or two we can allow, that's, negligent, whatever. Every single potential terrorist you let through. What's going on here, Mr. TSA agent? And that was part of the knife that was pointed to, that was hanging over their heads.
Yeah, there was this sword of Damocles over pretty much everybody. What was the scalping thing?
Yeah, so they were very creative with their tortures. One of them was they would tie a rope around someone's head. I don't think this was done very commonly. And then they would have a stick attached to it, and they would turn it until just basically the skin off top of their head popped off. To me, honestly, the psychological tortures were much more horrific because we can all wrap our heads, thanks to Hollywood, about people just being beaten, fingernails put off, and someone dislocates your shoulder. We've seen those movies, where the actors just getting the crap kicked out of them and jaw broken and whatever. You don't dare show, even in a Silence of the Lambs context, a movie where someone is brought in and if that kid is being shown hostage in a movie, he's going to get saved, right? Yeah. They're not going to show that you sign the confession and they shoot the kid anyway.
Well, what was that? General Secretary Stanislav Kosior?
Well, that was the hardest scene.
That was the worst scene in the book?
I think Peter Fechter might be the worst, but this was the one where, because he's also a very evil person, right? Stanislav Kosior. And he was head of Ukraine. Stalin brought him to Moscow and made him second in command or gave him a major position in January, I think, of 1938. And by May, he's arrested. And we don't know exactly what the tortures were done to him, but he was a good Bolshevik, strong. Stalin means man of steel. They pride themselves in their ruthlessness. And this is something the interrogators had to do. It's you're not going to feel sentimental because this enemy of the people is being tortured. What kind of person are you, right? You're a strong Soviet. And, they could have kept him up all night. They could have thrown cold water. Who knows what they pulled. There was one Russian military guy where they pulled out all his teeth. And then when he was pardoned, they gave him steel teeth, and he was instrumental in fighting the Nazis during World War II. And Stalin was like, oops, sorry, buddy. And the thing with that scene is, they did something to him which was not done to many other people, as far as my research indicates. And the question is, when the torturers reach this kind of apex of torture, is it something that they always had in the back of their minds? We don't want to go there, but we know we can do it. Or is it that this guy is a major name, we have to break him and we have to go into uncharted territory? Were they letting him think he's going to outwit them? Or were they was he actually doing it? Was he going for, what's his name? In Gitmo, Khalid, he was waterboarded 20 times, so some crazy number, which no one had ever done before. They're what, this guy is just a beast, right? So at a certain point, they brought in his teenage daughter and raped her in front of him. And then he broke. And when you read, even though the guy's a monster, he was complicit in the genocide of the Ukrainians and, just many tortures under his name, just to kind of try to get into his head to be I don't care what these people are going to do to me. I'm innocent. Let me talk to Stalin. I know how this works. I'm a proud Bolshevik. would never betray the people, spitting his blood in their faces. And then she comes in. It's what's she doing here? And he's oh, you're innocent, huh? Okay. And then he just saw, and the thing is, she killed herself. He outlived her. She threw herself in front of a train. And that's the kind of thing where when people think of oppression in the West, we think solitary confinement, cops not letting you sleep, they're beating the crap out of you, they're breaking your limbs. I think all of that is something that would be excruciating, no question, for us. But when you're watching someone assault your kids and know they're not going to have any consequences for it, and like that's a wrap for you. And it's just like, we don't know. None of us in the West, I think, except under maybe ridiculous circumstances, can appreciate that sense of powerlessness. Like even if someone in solitary confinement, shout out to Russ Ulbricht, can still write letters to people, receive information, read a book or something, there's a little bit of sovereignty. And that, which is just so obscene in like almost a spiritual sense, is, and the thing is, our heads would never go there. Like we don't think in terms like this. And they were just the Soviets were very, very conniving and crafty in their machinations.
Why was this extreme paranoia, overbearing police and Secret Service involvement, heavy use of cold cellars and hot cellars? Learning about that as well was pretty fucking awful. 16 men locked in a room where it was so small that you couldn't even touch the ground. And the only thing worse than that was the cold cellar, which was basically where you were left to freeze in this super cold Siberian winter.
They put you in a pit, like basically like a basement, and they threw ice water on you, naked.
Not good.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, you do the cold plunges.
That's true. That's true. Maybe I would have loved it.
They're a Kuya.
Maybe I'd have loved it. Now it's Kuya, just without the psychedelics and the ketamine. What's happening, people? If you enjoyed that, then press here for the full, unedited episode. And don't forget to subscribe. Peace.